The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage as 9-year-old Prince George carefully adjusted his school tie for the third time. His reflection in the mirror showed a boy trying to look confident, though his fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed down his hair. Today marked the beginning of a new school year at Lambrook School, and despite having attended for a while now, the first day always brought butterflies to his stomach. Down the hallway, 7-year-old Princess Charlotte was having her own morning routine, though hers involved significantly more negotiation. She stood before her wardrobe, hands on her hips, engaged in a serious discussion with her nanny about which hair ribbon would be most appropriate for the first day. Charlotte had strong opinions about her appearance, and today was no exception. She wanted everything to be perfect, not because she was nervous, but because she genuinely loved school and wanted to make a good impression on her new teachers. The youngest of the trio, 5-year-old Prince Louis, was experiencing his very first day of formal school. He had been attending nursery, but Lambrook represented something entirely different. As he sat on his bed, swinging his legs while his mother, Catherine, helped him with his shoes, his eyes were wide with curiosity rather than fear. Louis had always been the most adventurous of the three children, and this new adventure excited him more than anything else. William emerged from his study, having just finished a brief phone call with his private secretary about his schedule for the day. He had deliberately kept his morning free to ensure he could be part of this important moment for his children. As he walked toward the kitchen, he could hear the familiar sounds of a Wales family breakfast beginning to unfold. Catherine was already in the kitchen, moving with the practiced efficiency of a mother who had learned to manage 3 distinct personalities each morning. She had laid out the children's favorite breakfast items, knowing that familiar foods would help settle any nerves. George preferred his toast with a thin layer of marmalade. Charlotte liked her cereal with fresh berries, and Louis was content with whatever his siblings were having, though he usually ended up with jam on his face regardless of what he ate. The kitchen buzzed with conversation as the family gathered around the table. George discussed his hopes for the new term, particularly his excitement about joining the school's cricket team. He had been practicing his bowling technique all summer and was eager to show his improvement to the sportsmaster. Charlotte chattered about her art supplies, which she had organized meticulously in her new pencil case. She had color-coded everything and could hardly wait to start her first proper art lesson of the year. Louis, meanwhile, was more interested in the logistics of school life. He peppered his parents with questions about where he would eat lunch, whether he could bring his favorite toy car, and if the teachers were as nice as everyone said they were. His innocent curiosity brought smiles to everyone's faces and helped ease the slight tension that always accompanied first days. As they ate, William and Catherine exchanged glances that spoke of shared understanding. They both remembered their own first days at various schools, the mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with new beginnings. They had worked hard to give their children as normal an educational experience as possible, despite the extraordinary circumstances of their lives. The conversation turned to practical matters as Catherine reviewed the day's schedule with each child. George would be meeting his new form teacher and receiving his timetable for the autumn term. Charlotte was particularly excited about her new classroom, which she had heard had excellent natural light for drawing. Louis would be spending his first day getting acquainted with the school routine and meeting the other children in his year group. Outside, they could hear the sound of their protection officers conducting their morning security check, a routine so familiar that the children barely noticed it anymore. The officers had been coordinating with the school for weeks to ensure that the transition would be as smooth as possible for all 3 children. As breakfast concluded, the final preparations began. School bags were checked one last time, water bottles were filled, and Catherine made sure each child had their house key on their lanyard, though they would hardly need them with the security arrangements in place. The morning had passed quickly, and soon it would be time to make the short journey to Lambrook School, where a new chapter in their educational journey was about to begin. The journey to Lambrook School was filled with a mixture of chatter and contemplative silence. George sat in the front passenger seat, watching the familiar countryside roll past the windows. He had made this journey many times before, but today felt different somehow. Perhaps it was because his younger siblings were now joining him in this part of his life, or maybe it was simply the natural anticipation that came with advancing to a higher year group. Charlotte pressed her face against the window, pointing out landmarks she remembered from their previous visits to the school. She had an excellent memory for details and could recall exactly where they had seen the horses grazing during their tour and which building housed the art studio she was so eager to explore. Her excitement was infectious, and even Lewis, who had been quietly absorbing everything, began to lean over to see what she was pointing at. William drove carefully along the winding roads that led to the school, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror to check on Catherine, who was engaged in keeping Lewis calm with gentle conversation. She had a natural gift for reading her children's moods and knew exactly when to offer encouragement and when to simply provide a reassuring presence. As they approached the school gates, other cars were already beginning to arrive. Parents were walking alongside children of various ages, some looking confident and eager, others appearing more hesitant. William parked in the designated area, and, for a moment, the family sat in comfortable silence, taking in the scene before them. Lambrook School presented an impressive sight with its beautiful grounds and historic buildings. The architecture spoke of tradition and stability, qualities that both William and Catherine valued highly in their children's education. They had chosen this school not for its prestige, but for its reputation as a place where children could develop both academically and personally in a nurturing environment. The headmaster, Mr. Perry, approached their car with a warm smile. He had been anticipating this day as much as the family had, understanding the significance of welcoming not just one, but all three Wales children into the school community. His genuine enthusiasm for education was evident in the way he greeted each child individually, remembering details from their previous conversations. George stepped out first, automatically straightening his blazer and adjusting his bag on his shoulder. He shook hands with Mr. Perry with the confidence that came from familiarity, though there was still a hint of nervousness in his smile. As the eldest, he felt a certain responsibility to set a good example for Charlotte and Lewis, a weight he carried with remarkable maturity for his age. Charlotte bounced out of the car with characteristic energy, immediately beginning to ask Mr. Perry about the art facilities and whether she would be able to use watercolors in her first week. Her enthusiasm was delightful, and Mr. Perry found himself drawn into an animated discussion about the various artistic opportunities available at the school. Lewis emerged more slowly, staying close to his mother's side while he observed his new surroundings. Everything seemed very large from his perspective, and he was taking time to process all the new sights and sounds. The other children walking past with their parents seemed friendly enough, and he began to relax slightly as he noticed that many of them looked just as uncertain as he felt. Other families were beginning to recognize them, though the school community had been well prepared for this moment. Parents offered polite nods and warm smiles, but there was no sense of intrusion or inappropriate attention. This was exactly the kind of respectful environment that William and Catherine had hoped to find for their children. The family began to walk toward the main building, with Mr. Perry leading the way and sharing interesting facts about the school's history and facilities. Charlotte listened intently, occasionally interrupting with questions that demonstrated her quick mind and genuine interest in learning. George walked slightly ahead, beginning to point out various locations to Lewis, taking on the role of protective older brother with natural ease. As they passed through the corridors, the children began to encounter their future classmates. There were shy hellos and tentative smiles, the universal language of children meeting for the first time. Lewis seemed particularly interested in a boy about his own age who was carrying a pencil case decorated with dinosaurs, and Catherine noticed him beginning to show the first signs of wanting to interact with his peers. The tour continued through various classrooms, the library, and the dining hall. Each space had been carefully designed to create an environment that was both stimulating and comfortable for young learners. Charlotte was particularly impressed with the science laboratory, where she could see various interesting equipment that promised exciting experiments ahead. George was introduced to his new form teacher, Mrs. Harrison, a warm woman with decades of experience in education. She had clearly done her homework about his interests and abilities, engaging him in conversation about his summer reading and his thoughts about the upcoming term. Her genuine interest in him as an individual, rather than as a member of the royal family, was exactly what his parents had hoped for. The morning was progressing smoothly, and each child was beginning to settle into their new environment. The careful planning and preparation by both the family and the school were paying off, creating exactly the kind of positive first impression that would set the tone for the years ahead. The moment arrived for the children to separate and join their respective classes. George, now comfortable with the routine, gave his parents a confident hug and headed toward his classroom where several of his returning classmates were already gathering. His easy manner with his peers was evident as he joined a group discussion about summer holidays and shared experiences. The other boys welcomed him naturally, and soon they were deep in conversation about football matches and holiday adventures. Charlotte's separation was more elaborate, involving detailed instructions to her parents about where to find her at the end of the day and reminders about her art supplies. Her teacher, Miss Roberts, was a young woman with an infectious enthusiasm for learning that immediately appealed to Charlotte's curious nature. As Charlotte entered her new classroom, she was delighted to discover drawing paper and colored pencils already laid out on each desk, a thoughtful touch that made her feel immediately at home. Lewis's transition proved to be the most significant challenge of the morning. As the moment came to say goodbye to his parents, his confidence wavered slightly. He had been excited about school in the abstract, but the reality of being left in this new environment with unfamiliar people suddenly felt overwhelming. Catherine knelt down to his level, speaking quietly and reassuringly while William stood nearby, offering silent support. Mrs. Thompson, Lewis's reception teacher, approached with the perfect combination of warmth and professionalism. She had many years of experience helping young children navigate their first days of formal education, and she could see exactly what Lewis needed in that moment. Rather than rushing the goodbye, she invited him to help her with a special task, giving him a sense of purpose and importance that helped shift his focus away from his anxiety. William and Catherine watched as Lewis tentatively took Mrs. Thompson's hand and walked into the classroom. Other children were already engaged in various activities, and the room buzzed with the happy energy of young learners beginning their day. They could see Lewis beginning to relax as he observed his new environment and started to notice the interesting toys and learning materials available to him. The parents' departure was handled with sensitivity by the school staff, who understood that this transition was significant for the whole family. William and Catherine were given a final update on pickup procedures and contact information, ensuring they felt completely informed about their children's day ahead. As they drove away from the school, both parents reflected on the morning's events. Catherine remarked on how well each child had handled the transition, noting the different ways their personalities had shown through the experience. George's growing maturity and natural leadership qualities had been evident, while Charlotte's intellectual curiosity and social confidence had shown through her interactions with both teachers and peers. Back at school, George was settling into his first lesson of the day, which happened to be English literature. He had always enjoyed reading, and this year's curriculum promised some exciting new books that he was eager to explore. His teacher began the lesson by asking students to share their favorite books from the summer, and George found himself engaged in interesting discussions with classmates who shared his love of adventure stories and historical fiction. Charlotte was discovering that her new classroom exceeded even her high expectations. The art corner was well stocked with supplies she had never used before, and Miss Roberts was explaining the various projects they would be working on throughout the term. Charlotte's eyes lit up as she heard about pottery work, textile art, and even some basic printmaking techniques. She raised her hand enthusiastically to ask about watercolor painting, her current favorite medium. In the reception classroom, Lewis was gradually overcoming his initial hesitation. Mrs. Thompson had introduced him to the class's pet hamster, and his natural love of animals immediately engaged his interest. He was soon chatting with another boy about the hamster's habits and helping to measure out the correct amount of food. The structured activities of the morning were perfectly designed to help new students feel comfortable and engaged. The first lesson break arrived, and all three children experienced their first taste of playground dynamics at Lambrook. George joined a football game that was already in progress, his athletic abilities quickly earning him acceptance into the group. He found himself positioned as goalkeeper, a role that suited both his skills and his natural tendency to take on leadership responsibilities when needed. Charlotte explored the playground with a small group of girls from her class, pointing out interesting architectural details of the school buildings and asking questions about the various trees and plants in the landscape grounds. Her new friends were charmed by her knowledge and enthusiasm, and she quickly found herself at the center of an animated discussion about their favorite subjects and upcoming school events. Lewis spent his break time in a more structured environment appropriate for his age group, participating in organized activities supervised by teaching assistants. He was particularly drawn to the building blocks corner, where he began constructing elaborate towers with focused concentration. His natural creativity and spatial intelligence were evident as he worked, attracting the admiration of his new classmates. The morning continued with various lessons and activities designed to help the children settle into their new routines. Each teacher had been carefully briefed, not just about the children's academic abilities, but also about their individual personalities and interests, ensuring that they could provide the right kind of support and challenge for each child's continued development. Lunchtime at Lambrook School provided the children with their first real taste of independent social navigation in their new environment. The dining hall was a bustling space filled with the chatter of students from all year groups, creating an atmosphere that was both exciting and slightly overwhelming for newcomers. George approached lunch with the confidence of someone who had learned the school's routines, but even he felt a slight nervousness about how his siblings would handle this less structured part of the day. He spotted Charlotte across the dining hall, animatedly describing something to a group of girls who seemed genuinely interested in what she was saying. Her natural charisma and storytelling ability were clearly serving her well in making new friendships. The meal itself was a carefully planned affair, with the kitchen staff having been briefed about any dietary preferences or requirements. Charlotte had always been somewhat particular about her food, but she was pleasantly surprised by the variety and quality of options available. She chose a jacket potato with cheese and beans, something familiar that would give her comfort during this new experience. Lewis was experiencing lunch in the younger children's dining area, where the environment was more structured and supportive. Teaching assistants moved among the tables, helping with practical matters like opening difficult packages and encouraging conversation. Lewis found himself seated next to the boy with the dinosaur pencil case from earlier, and they quickly discovered a shared fascination with prehistoric creatures. George used his lunch break to explore more of the school grounds, joining a group of boys who were investigating the sports facilities. The cricket pitches were particularly impressive, and George found himself discussing batting techniques with older students who welcomed his knowledge of the game. His summer practice was clearly paying off, and he was looking forward to trying out for various teams throughout the term. The afternoon brought new challenges and opportunities for all three children. Charlotte's first art lesson exceeded even her high expectations. Miss Roberts introduced the class to observational drawing techniques, setting up still life arrangements that challenged the students to really look at the objects they were drawing. Charlotte's natural talent was evident, but more importantly, she demonstrated the kind of persistence and attention to detail that promised continued improvement. George found himself in a mathematics lesson that pushed his abilities in exactly the right way. His teacher, Mr. Davis, had prepared work that would stretch him without overwhelming him, and George appreciated the intellectual challenge. He had always enjoyed problem solving, and the mathematical puzzles presented to the class engaged his logical thinking skills effectively. Lewis's afternoon was filled with activities designed to help reception children develop their foundational skills while having fun. He participated in phonics games that helped with reading readiness and engaged in structured play activities that supported his social and emotional development. His natural intelligence was becoming apparent to his teachers, who noted his quick grasp of new concepts and his willingness to help other children. Throughout the afternoon, all three children began to develop a sense of belonging in their new environment. The school's philosophy of treating each child as an individual was evident in the way teachers adapted their approaches to different learning styles and personalities. Charlotte thrived on creative challenges and open-ended questions, while George responded well to clear structure combined with opportunities for leadership. The day's final lesson period brought different subjects for each child. George found himself in a history class discussing ancient civilizations, a topic that fascinated him and connected to his broader understanding of Britain's heritage and traditions. His questions demonstrated both knowledge and genuine curiosity, impressing his teacher and classmates alike. Charlotte was delighted to discover that her final lesson was music, where she would have the opportunity to explore her vocal abilities and perhaps learn a new instrument. The music teacher, Mrs. Williams, was known for her ability to nurture musical talent while making lessons enjoyable for all students, regardless of their initial ability level. Lewis ended his day with story time, a perfect way to wind down from the excitement and challenges of his first day at school. Mrs. Thompson chose a book about a brave little mouse going on an adventure, and Lewis was captivated by both the story and the interactive way it was presented. He found himself volunteering answers to questions and making connections between the story and his own experiences. As the final bell of the day approached, all three children began to feel a mixture of tiredness and accomplishment. They had successfully navigated their first day at Lambrook School, each in their own unique way. The challenges they had faced were age-appropriate and manageable, while the support they had received from teachers and new friends had been exactly what they needed. The teaching staff gathered briefly to share observations about the new students, noting strengths to build upon and any areas that might need additional attention. The consensus was overwhelmingly positive, with teachers commenting on the children's good manners, their eagerness to learn, and their natural ability to interact positively with their peers. Outside, parents began to arrive for collection, and the school's well-organized dismissal procedures ensured that the end of the day proceeded smoothly. The children's faces as they emerged from their classrooms would tell the story of their successful first day, setting the stage for many positive experiences ahead. The collection time at Lambrook School was orchestrated with the same careful attention to detail that had characterized the entire day. William and Catherine arrived punctually, parking in the designated area and walking toward the school buildings where other parents were gathering. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly, with conversations flowing naturally between families who were getting to know each other. George emerged first, walking with the confident stride of someone whose day had gone well. His school bag was properly organized, his tie was still reasonably straight, and, most importantly, his face wore the expression of someone who had genuinely enjoyed his day. He approached his parents with a smile, immediately launching into an enthusiastic account of his cricket practice session and the interesting history lesson about ancient Egypt. Charlotte appeared moments later, practically bouncing with excitement as she clutched a folder containing her first art project of the year. Her teacher had clearly made a positive impression, and Charlotte was eager to share every detail of her drawing lesson and the planning for their upcoming pottery project. Her animated gestures and rapid-fire questions about art supplies demonstrated that her creative interests had found a perfect outlet. Lewis took longer to appear, emerging hand-in-hand with Mrs. Thompson, who wanted to personally ensure his smooth transition at the end of his first day. His face showed the tiredness that comes after a day full of new experiences, but there was also unmistakable satisfaction in his expression. He had clearly enjoyed himself, despite any initial uncertainty about this new adventure. The brief conversations with each child's teacher provided William and Catherine with valuable insights into how the day had progressed. George's teachers reported that he had integrated seamlessly into his year group, showing leadership qualities during group work and asking thoughtful questions during lessons. His academic abilities were clearly developing well, and his social interactions suggested he would continue to thrive in the school environment. Charlotte's teacher was particularly enthusiastic about her creative potential and her enthusiastic participation in class discussions. Miss Roberts mentioned Charlotte's natural curiosity and her ability to ask questions that demonstrated deep thinking about the subjects they were exploring. Her artistic talents were evident, but equally impressive was her willingness to help other students and her positive attitude toward challenges. Mrs. Thompson's report on Lewis was glowing, noting his quick adaptation to school routines and his natural kindness toward other children. She mentioned his excellent listening skills and his creative approach to problem-solving activities. Most importantly, she emphasized that he had shown resilience when faced with moments of uncertainty, suggesting that he was developing the confidence necessary for continued success. The journey home was filled with overlapping conversations as each child tried to share their experiences simultaneously. George talked about his new friend James, who shared his interest in cricket and had invited him to practice together during the next break time. Charlotte described the art supplies she had discovered and began planning elaborate projects she wanted to attempt at home. Lewis, despite his tiredness, was eager to tell his parents about the hamster he had helped feed and the story about the brave mouse that had captured his imagination. His vocabulary had already expanded with new words he had learned, and he was proudly using them in context as he described his day. William and Catherine exchanged satisfied glances as they listened to their children's accounts. The decision to choose Lambrook School was clearly proving to be the right one, providing exactly the kind of nurturing yet challenging environment they had hoped to find. Each child was being treated as an individual, with teachers recognizing and building upon their unique strengths and interests. The conversation in the car naturally turned to plans for the coming days and weeks. George was looking forward to joining the school's environmental club, having learned about their conservation projects during the day. Charlotte was excited about the upcoming art exhibition where students' work would be displayed, and she was already mentally planning her contribution. Lewis asked several practical questions about tomorrow's routine, showing that he was already beginning to feel ownership of his new school experience. His questions demonstrated that he was thinking ahead and preparing himself for continued success, a sign of the growing confidence that would serve him well throughout his education. As they arrived home at Adelaide Cottage, the children burst through the door with energy that seemed to contradict their long day. They immediately began showing William and Catherine various papers and projects they had brought home, turning the kitchen table into an impromptu exhibition space for the day's work. The evening routine took on a special quality as each child processed their experiences through play and conversation. George organized his new textbooks and planned his homework schedule, approaching his increased academic responsibilities with characteristic thoughtfulness. Charlotte arranged her art supplies and began sketching ideas for future projects, her creativity flowing freely after a day of inspiration. Lewis played with his toy cars while recounting stories from his day, creating elaborate scenarios that incorporated elements from his school experience. His play demonstrated that he was successfully integrating his new experiences with his existing understanding of the world. As bedtime approached, the family reflected on the significance of this milestone day. Each child had successfully taken an important step forward in their educational journey, developing new skills and relationships that would serve them well in the years ahead. The foundation had been laid for what promised to be a rewarding and enriching experience at Lambrook School. The day had proven that careful preparation, supportive teachers, and the children's own resilience and curiosity could combine to create exactly the kind of positive educational experience that William and Catherine had envisioned for their family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Tonight was for celebrating the successful beginning of this important new chapter.